So the question is it over for Disney? Is it over? Where do they go from here? Where do they go? Do they have any remakes left to do, or they have a new direction? Because this Snow White thing clearly didn't work. Didn't work. And we have been talking about this for months. Let's check it out.
Well, it's finally here. After months of theories about it being cancelled, Disney's Snow White has officially hit the cinemas. The last 2 weeks before a movie's release, especially as one as controversial as Snow White, always seems the quietest. It's like the calm before the storm as everyone holds their breath in anticipation. And it turned out to be just as bad as everybody was expecting. It's a horrendous blend of questionable direction, poor costume design, and just awkward writing. And this all became evident as soon as the first song started playing. Because you see, one of the most significant issues with this movie is that they're trying to tell two different stories at once. The first is an ode to the original animation, something that many people felt very strongly about with this movie. Considering the original Snow White was one of the most important films in history, it's what made Disney where it is today and defeats evil through her kindness. It's infused with deeper messaging, appealing to everyone for generations. And now this modern version is just Disney's modern retelling of a headstrong girl destined to lead her kingdom. And this is probably the tuned down version, considering all the backlash the movie has received over the last 2 years. But unfortunately, neither story is told very well in this movie. Now, it's easy to pick out which parts of the movie are a nit.
Neither stories were told very well. I think the story was overshadowed. It was overshadowed by everything else going on about the movie. Rachel, her comments. You know what I mean? Her comments about Trump. Like, normally you see Disney would step in. And I heard rumors that they did, or at least tried to make an attempt to do some damage control, but I think by then it was probably too late. You know, usually you're contractually obligated to not say things that could pretty much hurt the film. You know, however you feel, if you were on the side with things she said or you were on the opposing sides of things she said and didn't like what she said. Either way, it's best to stay neutral when you're the face of a huge film that is supposed to come out. This was supposed to be big. Disney bet a lot on this. I'm sure of it. They bet a lot.
Initial footage and which are just reshoots, and this is mostly because of how Snow White's personality seems to change. For the first third of the film, Rachel Zegler surprisingly seems sweet and naive, reminiscent of the original cartoon, and everything Rachel Zegler seemed to be against in interviews for the movie. And yet here she is, cleaning the castle, singing to herself and worrying about what's happening in a kingdom she doesn't know much about. And she maintains this personality up until she leaves the dwarfs' cottage. However, it's when she's wandering the forest and encounters her love interest for the second time that her personality begins to take a jarring change. While still sheltered, she's much more stubborn and outspoken, just like people were predicting Snow White would be based on the actor's original interviews. She also doesn't seem to appreciate how her love interest is framing her. The two sides of her personality seem to be at war until the final confrontation with the evil queen. Then she's back to being a sweet, naive girl who happily dances her way through the kingdom. But unfortunately, Snow White's contradictory personality is just the tip of the iceberg with everything wrong in the movie. As overall, it just felt like to most viewers they were trying to do too much in too short of a time frame. As a result, some parts of the movie are very obviously missing. For example, at one point, Snow White mentions the name of a character we're never actually introduced to. They then try to hide this by panning over to the character in question, but it still feels out of place, especially since the scene in question is used to force romance. But you can't even really call the dynamic between Snow White and her love interest Jonathan as a romance. You see, Jonathan goes from actively disliking her and lecturing her about her privilege to then suddenly taking an arrow for her. But bearing in mind that up until this point, the two have known each other for just 2 days at most. Now, of course, this is often the case with Disney romance stories, but these stories are usually always supported by the chemistry between the characters. But Snow White and Jonathan just seem to have almost none. It's just completely forced in for the script. Despite this though, the movie
That sucks. That sucks. And that goes to show you, man, when you try too hard at something and it's just not organic. When it's organic, it just flows. Just think back to all of those Disney movies that raised a lot of the kids, myself included. They didn't feel forced. They didn't feel like it was forced upon you. It didn't feel like it was it was issues outside of the movie that worked its way into the movie or nothing like that. It just felt like it flowed. You sat down to watch the movie, and before you knew it, the movie was over, and you were trying to get your parents to rewind it. Started from the beginning so you could watch it all over again. And your parents were happy because they got you out of their hair for a little while. That movie those movies raised people because you would sit down in front of it, and before you knew it, the day would be gone.
Does insist that these two are madly in love with each other. They're so in love with each other, in fact, that it's enough to break the curse the evil queen puts on Snow White. But their whole romance is just way too rushed to ever feel meaningful, and it just ends up feeling flat. There's no intrigue, no new angle between the characters, no depth. They just end up together suddenly because it was convenient for the story. And speaking of convenience, that's the only thing that can be used to describe the climax of this movie. As Snow White faces no real challenges at the end like she's supposed to, despite saying that defeating the evil queen won't be easy. Her victory just sort of lazily curls itself around her hand. The townsfolk who stated to have forgotten what she looks like suddenly recognize Snow White and rally behind her without her having to say anything. She literally just walks into town and takes her hood off. That's it, there's no rousing speech, no sneaking around to get up close to the queen. She just suddenly appears in a bright red hood, and the people are like, yes, this is the princess. And together they suddenly walk to the castle, and the queen willingly comes outside to confront her face to face. But she doesn't even look surprised that Snow White is even alive. She just conjures up a dagger and tells her to kill her. But Snow White doesn't move. It seems like she doesn't know what to do now that she's in front of the queen. And you would have thought that she'd have a few more steps to overthrow the evil queen than gather a group of people and demand the castle back. This is as far as Snow White's plan goes. Fortunately, the queen does move the plot along by commanding her guards to kill Snow White, and it's all set up that these soldiers have been hunting the princess to kill her most of the movie, and yet we don't ever really see them outside of the scene and the queen's musical number. The audience is given no reason to ever care about them. It seems the only thing the movie really cares about is trying to prove Snow White's kindness is why she should lead, and the way she shows her kindness to these soldiers is by remembering their names. For some reason, this is completely enough for the soldiers to turn their back on the evil queen and suddenly rally behind Snow White. And yet nobody even knows who she is, she hasn't done anything to show them she will be less of a tyrannical leader than the evil queen, and all she does to win is just remember their names. This could have been more significant if we'd seen the queen not bothering to call people by their names, but even that would be stretching things. So you'd think at this point the evil queen would start doing a bit more magic. After all, the movie seems to establish that she is a powerful sorceress at the beginning. Surely there must be more to her magic than her withering roses and poisoning apples. Just anything, even some more aura. Gal Gadot doesn't even seem to care about being this evil witch.
Then that goes to that all of this that he's stating reflects the writing room. Who are you hiring these days? Maybe you got to go back and get some of those old school writers. You know, the classic, the people who created the classics. Have them as consultants at least, if they're still alive. You got to be able to mix the old with the new. You can't get so nuanced that you have this situation happen. Did you hear what it did at the box office? Oh, I got it pulled up. Y'all want to hear it now or after this? You know what I mean? I got the stats pulled up. And when you hear the stats that this thing did, yeah, their formula has got to change. They got to do something because this ain't working. It's bad. It's bad.
The only thing that actually seems evil is that she tries to stab Snow White, but unfortunately for her, the dagger is shot out of her hand and somehow renders her powerless. The queen is then allowed to run back into the castle and back to her mirror, because suddenly her priority when being overthrown is to check to see if she's the most powerful woman in the land. Because apparently when she's being overthrown, the most important thing she can do is check to see if she's the most beautiful woman in the land. The mirror then says no, the queen breaks it just as Snow White enters the room. And this, for some unexplainable reason, is what kills the queen. She shatters and is drawn into an unexplained dimension behind the magic mirror, which then reforms once the deed is done. The whole climax just leaves you scratching your head, you have no idea really what's even going on. And the main question is why any of this was greenlit in the first place. But this is far from the worst thing about the movie. That honor goes to the huntsman. In the original cartoon, the huntsman was one of the most terrifying characters in the movie. The moment when his shadow falls over Snow White like an omen of death was bone-chilling, enough to give any child nightmares. He didn't have a large part in the story, but was a very memorable character, and one that added a lot of depth to the movie. But the 2025 rendition of the character just doesn't hold a flame to the original. He's the least intimidating thing in the entire movie, and it doesn't help that he doesn't seem to know.
How is your character supposed to be the most intimidating, but is the least intimidating? Who did that? Who did that? Like, you're supposed to have some huge, like, overbearingly Thanos style looking just beast of a person play that character. Dark. Everything about that one should intimidate. You don't want to go too far, so you got to find that balance because you don't want to intimidate this movie is for children, it's supposed to be. So you don't want to intimidate them too much to where they're having nightmares and everybody's suffering from some kind of PTSD from the movie. You don't want to go that far, but you got to find that balance. You got to find that balance. Because I think that helps in everyone rooting for good to rule over evil in these movies. That's supposed to be the goal. Good to triumph over evil. So when you don't even depict evil in the correct way, then everybody's looking like, I know my ADHD would have been in the movie theaters on my phone. Or if I'm a kid and I lose interest, I'm getting on my parents' nerves. Especially if I'm in the movies. Can I get some popcorn? Can I get something to eat? Can I get some more drink? Can you give me another refill? Can I? Like, that would be that would be what it would be. Annoyance to my parents. Like it's just like they gotta figure out a better formula, man. I'm gonna keep saying that.
Know how to hold a dagger properly. He just pulls it out and stiffly points it at her, moving closer with every confused why she throws at him. Zegler's Snow White doesn't even seem remotely terrified of him. She could have easily stepped away from the huntsman and his poorly held knife, but instead she just randomly stands in one place and lets him advance on her. It's like he's stuck in place, nothing moving except his mouth as he instructs her to run into the forest. It's hard to see what the actors were really going for, but the execution was just terrible. At one point near the end of the movie, he's standing in the middle of a room, but the actor just seems so incredibly stiff that your eyes immediately go to him. He looks like a poorly animated NPC and it just looks awful.
That's supposed to make you, yeah, that's not it. And this is all constructive criticism, you know? This is all constructive criticism. As fans of what once was, this needs to be done. So don't be, oh, y'all are just hating on Disney or this. Like, that's not what it is. In order for them to get it right, this has to happen. This has to happen. It's inevitable. It has to happen in order for them to get it right. If Disney is gonna go back to being the incredible company, just putting out classic after classic after classic, this has to happen. So, with that being said, this is not it. No. Whoever decided that this was supposed to, no.
Not even Gal Gadot, who's been frequently called wooden, was that bad. But with all of that said, Snow White wasn't just a complete train wreck. There were a few good things about the movie. Most notably, or even surprisingly, was Rachel Zegler's singing. The song she sang definitely seemed to line up with Disney princesses in general, giving some merit to the claim that she was chosen for the role because she could actually sing. And while the same can't really be said for Gal Gadot, she still has some good moments. Her prosthetics for
I wouldn't know about that. I just never been a fan of like the musicals. Every time a musical scene, and I could be just the only one. So if you I don't know. But when a musical scene comes on, I fast forward. I am not the musical guy. I am not. I've never been into, what was that, Glee at one point in time and all that type of stuff like that. I just could not, even when in movies and stuff like that, even with like the plays and like Tyler Perry plays and different things like that. When they do the singing, it's just, I can't. Even if it's really, really good singing, I still just fast forward. I've never been like that guy. So, yeah, as soon as she would have started singing, I would have turned it, and it has nothing to do with her singing. She could have the most beautiful voice in the world. I just can't. I don't know why.
for the old hag were very well done, and seemingly worth the 4 hours in makeup, as it gave some level of realism to the film that would have been completely lost if Disney just tried to CGI the old hag look. But unfortunately, that's kind of it about the movie. It's just a boring, bland mess. Its plot was convoluted at the best of times, and it's just riddled with holes at worst. It's a completely forgettable movie that everybody will move on with and never even think about in the future. But at least Disney finally released this, after 2 years of just awful hype.
I think they're happy to get past it. I think they wanted to get past it. They'll never come out and actually say that. But I think Disney is happy that this one is behind them now. Because, like I said, I got the stats pulled up, bro. Listen to this. So it says the Snow White production budget was approximately $250 million for the budget, right? The film grossed $87 million globally. Not domestic. Globally is what it did. With 43 million domestic. That's not good. That's not good at all. Especially when you compare it to things like Beauty and the Beast. That it opened, let's see, Beauty and the Beast 2017. No. Yep, it said Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King 2019 opened at 174 million and 191 million domestically. They did that domestic. So when you compare that, yeah. Yeah. That's bad. This is definitely one they want to get behind them. It said both of them were surpassing 1 billion. Both surpassed the 1 billion mark globally. Yeah, this is bad. Rotten Tomatoes, 43%. 43% is what it received from Rotten Tomatoes. It's tough, man. I hate to see that. Especially for all the little girls whose parents told them so much about Snow White growing up. Told them so much about their childhood and how that movie played a part and how they could quote it. So much for them to potentially be let down by this thing. That sucks, man.
Even just the last 2 weeks before the film's release was just completely dead. Nobody even cared to speak about it anymore. It was like the calm before the storm as everyone held their breath in anticipation of a disaster. But this wasn't the case with Snow White. If anything, the controversy only seemed to get worse. And of course, their lead actress was right in the thick of it. As the release date of Snow White approached, Disney seemed to be doing everything possible to keep its lead actresses apart. Gal Gadot conducted fluffy interviews with various media outlets. Meanwhile, Rachel Zegler was traveling around singing in non-English speaking countries. The reason for this separation came after the two voiced differing political opinions. People could only speculate about what was really happening behind closed doors. However, with no way to confirm those speculations, people turned their attention to Zegler and her solo press tour. You see, there wasn't much coverage surrounding her appearances, as she was very rarely interviewed, which might not be
So what do you do in that situation if Disney? I think you separating them makes it worse. You play into the controversy of their different political views or comments that they made or different things that they were speaking about. You feed into it that way. You do everything you can to get them two in a room and get them on the same page for the sake of the movie. After the movie is over and they do their press run and everything that they're contractually obligated to do, then they can go back to whatever it is. But you have to nip that in the bud. And maybe they need to put some type of clause in their contract. Because you can see clearly that two leading people of a movie can ruin the movie, could cause it to not reach its full potential, could affect the movie, however you want to say it. Two people can do that. Especially the two leading people. Now, granted, the other things that they had nothing to do with, the script writing and everything else, that's on the writer's room in Disney. But this part of it is extremely important as well. This is all marketing. And not all good press, contrary to popular belief. Not all press is good press. Everybody want to say all press isn't bad press. Listen, this was for this. It affected the movie.
Surprised considering the past interview she did and how awful this was for the film's reception, but it was still weird. With hundreds of millions going into this movie, why was the lead actress not being interviewed about it? Well, not too long after her tour ended, an insider at Disney confirmed the real reason why. Apparently the studio minimized the number of press questions Zegler received because she was out of control, which is no surprise after her last few scandals.
There's a big focus on her love story. With a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
However, despite the limited press coverage, Zegler had still found a way to upset people. As she realized that people weren't taking kindly to her bashing the original animation, she changed her tune on many things. Unfortunately for her, nothing.
That's where Disney has to realize how important their core. You know, a lot of those people that watch the older movies are still fans, and we're looking forward to a new remake. And when you say something like that, that offends them. That offends them. Now, you could be like, oh, everybody's just so sensitive. True, but those are the people that are spending money. So, what do? Okay, you choose to offend them. Now look at your box office. I think they're pretty important. Just saying.
She says it's going to save the film now, not even commending people for their passion of the original movie. During an interview with Vogue Mexico, she commented that it was an honor to be a part of something that people felt so passionate about. But nobody listened to this after her previous interviews, as it just seemed like a desperate scramble to appease those who threatened to boycott the movie, much like Disney's attempts to keep the actresses away from each other. It did nothing to stave off the controversy that was mounting, as there was only so long that Disney could avoid having Gaydot and Zegler in the same room, and the studio knew that. However, rather than bring them together for an interview, the studio broadcast just how bad things were at the Oscars. I suppose if you're going to tank a film, you might as well do it in style. During the evening, Gaydot and Zegler presented an award, and people could immediately tell that something was off. Typically, when celebrities present together, they exchange banter to draw laughter out of the audience. There's some natural chemistry. But with them, there was absolutely no chemistry. Not even Disney could force it. From the moment they walked.
Oh, that looked bad. I know somebody at Disney was like, who? Somebody might have gotten fired for that. Whose idea? Like, clearly, no back and forth, funny banter, no like, they ain't even looking at each other. The face looks like you can see it, like, I don't want to be here. Let me just read this. I don't even want to stand next to her. Even if it's not the case, it gave off that vibe. Just a few second clip showed that. Whoever's in charge, bro, this is just bad idea after bad idea after bad idea.
On stage, they seemed to ignore each other. With polite smiles on their faces, they read from the teleprompter and stared right at the camera. They wouldn't even look at each other. It was like they were purposefully avoiding each other despite being on the same stage, convincing everyone that these two people couldn't stand each other. They weren't even playfully pretending to hate each other either, which arguably would have saved them any rumors about disliking each other. They just pretend the other one doesn't exist until they can get off the stage and sigh a breath of relief. The whole thing was made so much better by the fact that they were presenting the award for Best Visual Effects, and out of all possible categories, that was the one chosen for the leads of the CGI hodgepodge that is Snow White. Whoever made that decision is either clueless or paid off by Disney. But media outlets claim that the hatred between the two is why Disney has cancelled and scaled back the Snow White premieres, along with all the hate online. Which is really crazy considering that Disney premieres have always been massive events. The guest lists are always star-studded, and everyone who can wants a chance to walk the red carpet. Of course, every media outlet in existence is there taking photos and interviewing everyone they can. And there's always a premiere in Europe or the UK for those who aren't in America. However, shortly after this Oscar fiasco, the studio took a different approach with Snow White. There was a red carpet, but Disney's guests were asked fewer questions than usual. This was because Disney limited coverage to photographers and a house crew, because what better way to prevent your lead from killing your movie than keeping her from saying anything? The premiere in Los Angeles wasn't the only one affected, but while that one was only downscaled, the one meant to be held in London was just cancelled altogether. The last time a studio scaled down their own premieres so drastically was for The Flash, and that was because of Ezra Miller's criminal behaviour. If that's not a sign that Disney has zero faith in the film's success, then I don't know what is. But impressively, Snow White's premiere was not only the smallest Disney has hosted in years, it's also had the worst numbers for advance tickets. When studios like Disney release a film, they start selling tickets at least a month in advance. Because of the hype that follows these films, the opening weekend showings are sold out within hours. With these huge $100 million+ budgets, you kinda need this, otherwise the film will just bomb. But this time the studio didn't even open advance ticket sales until 2 weeks before the movie was set to release. This was almost unheard of, especially for a film the studio once thought was a guaranteed hit. It's literally Disney's most famous film in the past, and the one that made Disney as successful as it is today. But even more unheard of is just how slowly they were selling the tickets. The theatres were taking ages to fill up. Smaller theatres had barely filled up after a few days, and the excessively large ones, well, the numbers were just downright embarrassing. A month ago, Snow White was expected to make $65 to $68 million, but as ticket sales have failed to gain traction, those numbers dropped to an estimated $48 to $58 million. This is on par with what The Marvels made on its opening weekend. Analysis have tried to blame the depressing numbers on the age of the original film. Apparently younger audiences might not recognize Snow White because the original movie was released all the way back in 1937. But this just feels like a really flimsy excuse, especially when you actually see the movie. The company knew they had to do something drastic to turn this movie around and finally recover the financial loss the movie was destined to have. And so Disney would try to do everything they could to shift the narrative, which is why the morning after the original premiere, it seemed like no media outlet had anything bad to say about Snow White. After 2 years of controversy and people bashing the film relentlessly, Disney had seemingly won the battle. Variety even called it a visual feast. One critic called it the best live action adaptation in years, with people even going so far as to say that this would be fans' favourite live action remake. All of this onslaught of positivity just made no sense. It came out of nowhere. It was almost like being in a parallel universe where Disney remembered how to write these stories. But unfortunately for Disney, they couldn't control the narrative for that long, as people soon realized the positivity was only limited to the few outlets that Disney had invited to the premiere. And on March...
That was another bad decision. Bad decision, man. Like, we understand how powerful Disney still is and how far their arms reach. But your arms wasn't going to be able to reach far enough that it needed to reach in order to save face in this situation. There's no way you could do it. You tried. Get it behind you. That's the best course of action I can see right now. Get it behind you. Quickly get on to the next one. Get good writing room with the newer age generation, because you just can't have both. You need to, one or the other. You need to have a balance of both in order for the thing to be successful, in my opinion. So let's get this thing behind you quickly, Disney, and move on to the next one with better writers, less controversy, and see, can you get back on track? Because I do have faith in Disney. You know what I mean? Regardless of anything else.
March 16th, 2025, writers at That Park Place had a very interesting discovery brought to their attention, as it seemed the Hollywood Reporter had quietly attempted to edit one of their articles. The article in question referenced Snow White's CGI dwarfs and how they came to be. This was such a weird thing to do, it managed to take away the spotlight from Rachel Zegler, as according to the Hollywood Reporter, Mark Webb, the director of the movie, had always planned to use CGI dwarfs. Not only was this a strange attempt to make Snow White critics look unreasonable, but this was just a blatant lie. It was like they were hoping people were too stupid to notice the change. But unfortunately for the Hollywood Reporter, someone had actually downloaded the original article as a PDF and immediately brought the change to That Park Place's attention. And it showed how Disney and all these other media companies would go this slow just to try and change the narrative, which is not something you do when you're confident in the movie. But as soon as the movie was released,
can't do that in this day and age, man. Somebody somewhere is gonna have the original. You just can't do that. That's like people who go live and quickly try, if something go wrong, they quickly try to delete it, take it down real quick. Somebody somewhere clipped it up, bro. Somebody somewhere did a screen grab, or screen record, screen capture, something, and they have the files. Yeah, that was bad. This is all bad.
Release, and the veil was lifted, all bets were off, and Snow White never stood a chance. The Independent called it lazy and visually repellent, the HuffPost called it a strange hot mess, and the Times declared that Disney had trashed its reputation, and that the movie was a new low both for the studio and for cultural desecration. The Guardian's Peter Bradshaw was particularly harsh, as he called it an exhaustingly awful project, with a tiring pseudo-progressive approach that felt hollow, with everybody everywhere basically coming to the exact same conclusion: don't watch this movie. CBS News even went so far as to say Snow White is firmly the pantheon of films that chip away at our culture simply by existing. This whole film has just been nothing but one problem after another for Disney, and a final wake-up call that none of Disney's BS will be tolerated by audiences anymore.
Like I said, I'll end on that note. I hope Rachel's how do you say her name? Rachel. Let me look again. How do you pronounce it? I keep messing her name up. Rachel Zegler. I hope she gets another chance. I really do. And this will be a learning experience for her. Disney, like I said, they put this one behind them. Get all new with the old, mix that in. And you can, there's still a market for these remakes if you do them the right way. You know? There is. I think so, at least. You just got to do it the right way, and you can still make a decent amount of money here and still please the old fans and the new, bring the new in. And that's what I essentially think they're trying to do. You know, bridge the older generation fans with the new and give them something to talk about at the dinner table. We do it all the time with my family. Show them some old, them with the new, compare and contrast. Normally, it's a lot of them hating on the old school stuff. You know, how did y'all watch this grainy stuff? Really, bro? Really? Huh? But it's fun at the end of the day, you know, to go back and forth and have that conversation. And Disney does a good job at providing that for us. They just hopefully made a mistake here and they learned from it. So get back to being you, Disney. And we'll see with the next one. Y'all let me know what you think. So next one, I'm gone. Peace.